Good morning, everybody, and good morning, everybody in Facebook world. Big hello to Tim Starks, Scott Morning, and Craig Couliard. A little bit louder. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm filling in for Tim Stark this morning. I'm Dr. Jody Goldenhouse. I'm the Sports Council of the MCA. I'm the chair of the Sports Council of the MCA. So thank you for having me this morning. It's my pleasure to introduce Mark this morning. Mark's going to be our speaker. He will be giving a presentation on relating to the athlete. And laser, that's a good one. Photomodulation relating to the athlete. Mark joined Lightforce team in early 2017 as the director of clinical development to focus on improving clinical messaging within the sales team and managing a national team of clinical sales specialists. Prior to joining Lightforce, Mark was the division director for an outpatient physical therapy company that had over 125 locations in the Southeast United States. He has over 15 years of management experience in the PT space. Mark graduated from Shenandoah University with a master's in physical therapy in 1999 and then completed his transitional doctorate of physical therapy in 2007 from Marymount University. Mark has been board certified by the APTA as a clinical specialist in orthopedics, or OCS, since 2003. He created and taught SI Joint Made Easy for CAPTA, continuing education courses for 2010 to 2013. He's currently a faculty member with the Institute of Advanced Musculoskeletal Treatments and teaches courses on lumbopelvic treatments and examinations, as well as lower corridor treatments and examinations. Mark has contributed to questions for the APTA orthopedic specialist exam via participation with the Specialization Academy of Content Experts. So we have a really great topic, really great speaker to help you guys enjoy.
Thank you. So I want to thank Dr. Stark for inviting us in today and for you all to get up so early this morning. This is a bright, early wake-up call. So just by show of hands, how many folks are familiar with laser or have used laser in the clinic or lab a little bit? How many people have used a class 4 laser, a little higher power? So lots of hands, that's great. So Dr. Stark wanted me to try to talk a little bit this morning about laser and how it can affect the sports athlete, and hopefully you'll find today's talk informative and interesting. So what we'd like to talk on or touch on today is a brief background on what photobiomodulation is, and that's the preferred term for laser therapy in today's world. We're going to review some of the nomenclature that's out there to describe laser therapy, differentiate the different classes of laser, review the mechanisms of PBM, and the factors influencing treatment effectiveness. Physiologic effects of PBM, we'll go through that pretty quickly, and then review 3 studies impacting the sports market, and do a quick review of dosing and laser treatment if time allows us to do so. So, when you hear laser, is this what comes to mind? So for your patients, this very well may be what they think about. So if that's the case, you might have to take a minute or two to really describe, if you're recommending some laser treatment for them, what it's about, because from a peer avoidance standpoint, they might be thinking about this, and that could be a problem. So what's funny is, the 20, 30 years ago, I'm dating myself, you watch Star Trek, and you'd see Bones with this magic little wand waving it over his patients and to treat people and make them feel better, or diagnose what's going on. We used to sort of laugh about it, like, okay, sure. But here we are today. We're using off-surface laser devices to create significant changes in tissue. So maybe Bones is a little ahead of the curve. Historically, I just wanted to point out 2 things that are notable in the light world. In 1903, Niels Vinson won a Nobel Prize. It's the only modality that's ever won a Nobel Prize for treating lupus vulgaris, which is a real red, ugly rash that takes place in the skin. And he found that by treating it with light, that there was improvement. And then in 1967, Andre Mester, he's sort of the godfather of light therapy. he was trying to replicate a study treating cancer cells with a laser. And the story goes that he was using a laser that had less power than what the initial study did. And when he used it on the mice, he noticed that it didn't affect the tumor, but there was a significant change in the amount of hair growth on the skin. And it made him start to sort of wonder, like, hey, what's going on from a physiologic standpoint that would make that happen? And that kind of really got the ball rolling on all of laser therapy. So from just a quick timeline, in the 60s, that was when the fencing work started. In 1972, the FDA cleared the use of Class 3B lasers, which is lasers that have less than half a watt of power, so the lower wattage units. And in 2004, Class 4 lasers, which were units that had over a half a watt of power, were okayed. And those Class 4s, we'll see here in a second, has a wide variety of uses. So since that time, there's been a significant increase in the medical literature on laser. And in 2009, there was a real sentinel study done by Roberta Chow on chronic and acute neck pain with laser. And it showed that it was effective up to 22 weeks after treatment, and really sort of helped get us put on the map with a number of different organizations. So the term that, if you were going to do a mesh header search, you want to use PBM or photobiomodulation. It's the most accurate describer of what the laser does to tissue, because a lot of people incorrectly think that laser's a heating modality. All it does is heat tissue up, and that's how it works, but that's really not accurate. It deals on a cellular level and plays with metabolism, which allows a number of changes to take place in different tissues. This was agreed upon by a conference of the North American Association of Light Therapy and the World Association of Laser Therapy in September 2014. So it's still relatively new out there. So what are the medicinal uses of PBM? And I'm going to call it, because it's a mouthful, to say photobiomodulation. It's good for acute and chronic pain. And the reason why that's the case is that it's dealing with increasing metabolism. So if cells inflamed, it helps it get better quicker. So it's not going to get you stop the inflammatory process. It's actually just going to help the cell get through that phase and get into the proliferative phase quicker. So acceleration of the inflammatory processes increases microcirculation. Central and peripheral nervous systems can be affected by the laser. And wound healing, it works wonderfully for, given that its superficial nature, light can affect that quite well. So a lot of the early research that was supporting laser use was for wound care. So just for clarity, I think it's important for you guys as healthcare providers, you're going to hear lots of different terms, you're going to see lots of different terms in the literature regarding laser. So you'll see LLLT very frequently, and that's probably the second most accurate describer of the laser use. The problem is that LLT can stand for low-level laser therapy. It can also stand for low-level light therapy if you're using LEDs. So it's still a little ambiguous. Cold laser was a popular term that was used talking about the Class 3B and 3A lasers, Class 2 lasers, because when you put it on the skin, there's no heat that's felt. So that term is applied, but for the Class 4 lasers, that do apply some warming on the skin, that's not quite as accurate. So laser therapy, light therapy, high-intensity laser therapy, LED therapy, those are all things you may see. But if you were going to go do a Google search, use the PBM as your search tool. So Dr. Stark wanted me to make sure that I clarified different classifications of lasers for you guys so that you can understand that. And if you can think in the broadest of terms, the classes come from eye safety. So the more risk you have to your eye, the higher the classes of the laser. So a Class 1 laser is a scenario where the laser is completely sealed. So you could have quite a powerful laser in an industrial printer, but because it's encased in the machine, it has no risk to your eye. It would be classified as a Class 1. So Class 2 is going to be the barcodes you see at the stores. Very low power, they have very diffuse output. So unless you were to stick it up your eye and leave it there for a period of time, you're probably pretty safe. Class 3A, that would be your classic laser pointer. It's going to be less than half a watt, and the Erconia low-level like equipment falls into that category. And then class 3B, that's basically up to a max of a half a watt. So 500 milliwatts is going to be the highest power rating on a class 3B. Once you get to that, you do have to wear protective eyewear when you're using that equipment. So then you jump into class 4, which are the units that are over half a watt. But the thing that's very important to understand is that all class 4 lasers are not the same. So sometimes you'll read reviews and they clump it all into, oh, well, class 4 lasers are for surgery, they're not for PBM. Well, there are certain lasers that are designed for surgery, and there's certain ones that are designed for industry, and others that are designed for treating patients. So just understand that. The difference is that the intensities and the spot sizes of surgical lasers and the wavelengths they use, which we'll talk about here in a minute, are very different because they have a different purpose. So of those types of lasers, pulsing is generally a technique or an option on equipment to try to control surface heat. So it'll put intensity of light on and then take it off, put it on and take it off, and that helps dissipate heat. And you see that with long pulse lasers, which are the hair removal lasers that are used, and then the Q switch, which are the high power, high intensity lasers that come on and off to try to photoablate tattoos or dark pigmentation on the skin. And then the last would be the continuous wave, which is ideal for the surgical lasers because they're trying to cut and cauterize and want a nice continuous stream of energy. And then the photobiomodulation tools because you're trying to paint tissue so that you can get cellular changes. So just to make a note, those power of the surgical lasers is measured in kilowatts per centimeter squared. And for photobiomodulation, we're talking about 0.1 to 5 watts per centimeter squared. So we're talking about thousands versus a handful. So that the intensity and power of the beam for a surgical laser versus a photobiomodulation laser is quite a bit different. So important to understand that as a consumer. And this just helps clarify that a little bit further. So from a photothermal effect with hair removal, what they're trying to do is heat up that dark follicle. It absorbs the light and then gets hot to try to kill the hair follicle. So this works really well when you have fair-skinned people with dark hair because the skin isn't going to absorb as much energy. When you start getting dark-skinned folks with dark hair, creating that effect without getting a lot of heat on the skin becomes a lot more challenging for the treater. Photomechanical, that would be those Q switched. If you go in and somebody got a tattoo they're not too happy with and they want to get rid of it, this is what they're going to do. And they're trying to go there and actually break up the ink that's in the cell to get that to mechanically be removed. And then the photochemical changes are what we're searching for with PBM to have effects on mitochondria and metabolism. So when you're introducing light, the first law of photochemistry, and the thing that's most important, is you got to absorb the light. If it's not absorbed, you're not going to make any change in the cell. So in the mitochondria, the inner mitochondrial membrane, there's these things called chromophores, and those chromophores are what will grab the light. And they're specific to very narrow bands of wavelength. And when it's absorbed, you get changes on a number of fronts, and the wavelength that is hitting that chromophore is extremely important. And so that might seem like this really weird concept, but I'll show you in a second that you are more familiar with chromophores than you think. When the laser is introduced to the surface of the skin, you're going to have 4 things that are going to generally happen. You're either going to have that light scattered, which if you hold it further away, there's going to be more of that. You also get quite a bit of that as the light enters into the body and it hits subcutaneous fat. That has a tendency to really scatter light quite a bit. You can get transmission, which goes straight through the tissue, and that's not ideal either. That's more common when you have a very short wavelength with a high intensity. That's X-rays or gamma rays. They transmit readily. Reflection, which if you took the applicator and put it at an angle, you're going to get more reflection of the light off the skin, which is obviously not a great thing when you're trying to get it deeper. And then the last is what we're searching for, which is absorption, to actually have the cells take that light energy and use it. So, common example of a chromophore that you probably all know and read about but didn't put it all together is just, plants and chloroplasts. So they're grabbing very specific wavelengths of light, both at the blue and red spectrums, and those are what activate that and allow photosynthesis to take place. So in the body, another very common thing is in the eye, Rhodopsin is the receptor that's going to absorb very specific wavelengths of red, blue, and green light. And by doing that, that's what allows us to see color. So if you're colorblind, you're going to have certain receptors that aren't seeing the blue, the red, or the green, and that's what's behind it. So when you're dealing with trying to treat deeper tissues, most of our muscle cells and nerve cells, they don't see the day of light, and that's the thing that's really unique about this. We're creating this phenomena that doesn't normally happen in nature. But those cells still have those same properties of being able to grab that light energy and make changes. So that's what's pretty cool. The thing is that as you start to introduce light into the body, there's tissues and molecules that are competing for that light energy. So you're trying to target a nerve, but there's a lot of different molecules that are going to try to grab that light and steal it away, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. So the organelle you're trying to hit is the mitochondria. And more specifically, the inner membrane of the mitochondria, there's a portion of it called cytochrome C oxidase, and that's where the heme group lies that allows it to receive the light and make a change. So, talking about electron transport chains and mitochondria, ties into the Krebs cycle and makes everybody break out in a little bit of cold sweat. So when I saw this cartoon, I had to put it in there. Memorize 20 amino acids, glycolysis, and the Krebs cycle. So, given that it is 7:20 in the morning, you certainly get a free pass on that. And this is a nice little cartoon schematic, kind of shows how this works. So you get NADH or FADH2 introduced into the mitochondria. It's going to transfer electrons along. You're going to be releasing hydrogen ions outside of the inner mitochondria. Then they're eventually going to get reintroduced via ATP synthase, which is going to take and phosphorylate ADP into ATP. And that's in a nice, happy, healthy cell. And as long as that's happening, things will go along pretty well. When you have an injured cell, you get a low oxygen scenario, things change a bit. So the cytochrome C molecule that transfers those electrons, those 2 electrons to cytochrome C oxidase, it gets bound down by nitric oxide. And so it's a chemical process that takes place to protect the cell, to downregulate metabolism, to help try to protect it when things aren't right. There's a number of moderators that take place on the inflammatory cascade that tell the body, hey, we have something that's going on here that needs to fix it. The problem is it cuts down on the cell's ability to create ATP, so lower energy. And if this goes on for too long, you can actually get cell death or apoptosis. So you bring in the light, and it hits right there, and it's absorbed by the cytochrome C oxidase. When that happens, the nitric oxide is able to get released, and it unbinds. And when that happens, then the transport of electrons can start to happen. It binds to CAMP, which allows O2 to start being metabolized again, and water is produced as a byproduct. And once again, we're creating ATP. So you're essentially jump-starting, turning on a cell again. And that's what's so cool about this. You're making a change in the cell itself. It's not just a secondary effect, like if you're using a heating modality, like a hot pad or something that's going to bring in extra blood flow via vasodilation. The increase in blood flow is happening because you're actually releasing this nitric oxide locally, which is going to allow the cells to heal and increase the metabolism from something that would normally be more stagnant. So in a nutshell, that's pretty much why this works so well. So PBM's mechanism of action, just in review, you're going to get increased cytochrome C oxidase activity, which is going to free things up, increases the function of the mitochondria. It's going to increase oxygen consumption. You're going to get more ATP produced, and that's going to restore the energy balance of mitochondria, which is going to make the change in the tissue. So research has supported these findings. There's several studies that support it. You're going to get increased cytochrome C oxidase activity, which is going to increase your ATP, your reactive oxygen species, and nitric oxide levels. You're going to see changes in cellular redox, calcium, potassium, CMP, and pH. Those are all because the active pumps that are being driven in those membranes are going to start functioning better, so it's going to help balance the pH. You're going to get induced transcription factors, which are going to help with RNA, DNA production. That's going to help with new tissue development. And then balance cellular energetics by all those things that are happening there. It's going to help the cell be much more likely to survive instead of going into cell death if it's injured. So when you're trying to treat stuff that's deeper in the body, that's been the real challenge with photobiomodulation over the years. The lower power lasers and the early stuff did a really good job with wounds and things that were superficial, but when you're trying to get deeper and get to tissues that are 3, 4, 5 centimeters into the body, like a facet or a nerve root, things of that nature, you have to have a lot of different things going on to make that happen effectively. Because if you don't, you can sit there and put the light source on the body, but it won't make a change. You need a certain baseline level of energy to get to the cells and the tissue that's injured to have this PBM effect take place. If you don't have enough, then it won't happen. If you have a moderate to high level of energy that's introduced, you're going to get the effect at the chromophore, the mitochondria, you're going to get a change. But then on the other end, if you get too much, you can get photoinhibition, which will slow down the reaction. So there's a thing called the Arndt-Schultz principle, and that's it's sort of like the Goldilocks, the 3 bears. There's the too stiff, too soft, and just right. You want just right when you're using the laser. So just to review the wavelengths, visible wavelengths are around 400 to 700 nanometers. That's what we can see. The retina is able, though, to process 330 to 1400 nanometers. So it has the ability to see things that are outside of visible light. And that's why when you're using the laser, you have to wear the protective eyewear to block those near-infrared beams to protect the retina. Photobiomodulation generally is going to be using somewhere between 650 and 1350 nanometers. That's the sweet spot that they call the optical window or the therapeutic window. And the reason for that is that those wavelengths are found that they can actually get into the tissue. So this just shows you that these are 5 things, molecules that are going to try to fight for that light energy that you're introducing. So hemoglobin, oxyhemoglobin, myoglobin, melanin, and water. They're all going to want to grab that light energy, which is not going to go to where, if you're trying to treat a nerve or a tendon or a joint capsule, it's not going to go there if this is grabbing it. So this slide helps give you a sense of how that all happens. So if you look at the y-axis is absorbance, and this is the logarithmic representation, so it can be a little bit confusing as far as what degree melanin plays here, but on the bottom is wavelength in nanometers. So you can see that that dark dotted line, that's melanin, and it's very dominant in grabbing light, as we would assume. It's designed to do that and grab the sun's energy. So in the lower wavelengths, if you were going to try to treat it around 600, 650 nanometers, melanin is going to grab a lot of that energy. So the lasers that are designed to treat wounds, they tend to hang out around that window, 500 to 650, because they want it to be absorbed at the surface. As you get closer to 1 micron of wavelength, that's where water starts to play a much bigger role in absorbing. So the surgical lasers, they're going to be set up with wavelengths that are greater than 1 micron. Usually, sometimes it's even 2, because you can see those spikes up there at 2,000 nanometers. That would be perfect if you're trying to basically get the water to get hot so that you can cause cutting or cauterization. So in that optical window, you basically are trying to find where that spot is that you're going to get penetration. There's always going to be some of the light that's absorbed by these other structures, but we want to try to minimize that effect. So our lasers use 2 wavelengths, primarily 810 and 980 for this reason. Our science has concluded that those are the most efficient wavelengths to not have the energy grabbed by the stuff we don't want it. And then we have a third 650 nanometer beam, which is just the red beam that you can see where you're treating. There's really not any therapeutic effect of that. It's just so that you can see. If we just had the 2 infrared beams, you wouldn't be able to know what you're treating or be able to see it. So any questions about that at all? So wavelength, as you just saw, very important, right? The second piece to understand when you're trying to treat tissues at depth is this concept of therapeutic depth. And if you can just think of, you have more energy on the surface, you're generally going to have more energy trickle down at depth, and that's real important. So the analogy I've sort of come up with, if you can think of a cup that had a sponge on the top, and you were trying to get water to the bottom of the cup, if you just poured a little bit of water into the sponge is not going to allow much to get down to the bottom of the cup. And if you took a pitcher and just dumped it into that sponge, you're going to get a lot of water that comes down to the cup. And that's what we're trying to do with the higher power lasers, the higher energy at the surface. We're just trying to allow more that when it gets down to where we want it, there's enough to create an effect. And it gets confusing because in the literature they'll talk a lot about, hey, well, wavelength is the key component for penetration. and it's extremely important. But there's this aspect is another big important factor for the reason why our products are very successful in treating deeper tissues. So, just to review and be clear, wavelength is going to be an important factor. The color of the patient's skin, the more melanin they have, the more light they're going to grab. And the more that's grabbing the surface, the less it's going to get at depth. So if you have dark tattoos on a patient, or if they're dark skinned, or they have both, that's going to be a problem as far as getting light deeper. It's also going to create more heat in the skin because it's going to grab that energy and get warm. So understand that when you're creating energy at the surface, most of your energy is lost within the first few millimeters. So by 4 or 5 millimeters into the tissue, you've probably already lost 60–70% of that light energy. So if you start with a small amount, there's just not a lot left over for treatment. And this gives you a real nice visual effect on it. It's a computer simulation that shows that stuff on the left of the slide. That's where the laser is being introduced. And so that's going through 1 millimeter of epidermis on the far left, and then it goes through 2 millimeters of dermis, 3 millimeters of sub-Q fat, and then 50 millimeters of muscle. And that green circle shows you kind of the therapeutic depth. That's the tissue we're trying to address. You can see how much less intensity of the light that's left over, right? So imagine what that would look like if you increased the sub-Q fat from 2 millimeters or 3 millimeters to 6. Or you had an NFL lineman, so he's got 100 millimeters of muscle that you're trying to get through as opposed to 50. This ability to get energy down at depth becomes a much bigger problem. And without having a significant amount of energy on the surface via higher power, you're going to have a real challenge treating that kind of athlete. So this gives you a nice visual check. There's an infrared camera that's on the back of that hand. And so it just shows that at 1 watt of power, you can't see any of the light coming through the hand. At 5, you get to see some more. Then at 10, you see even more. So it just gives you a nice idea of, hey, if I was going to try to treat cells that were in the back of this hand without flipping the thing over, you'd probably have a better shot at affecting that tissue with 10 watts than you would with a 1 watt wand. So just to review that concept, skin color, body type, the size of the patient, those are all going to play factors. And then the application style. If you have, we have an on-contact head in our equipment, this roller ball, we have a patent on this, we're the only laser company that has something like this, but it allows you to compress tissue and get close to it. And by physically getting the light source closer to the affected tissue, it's obviously going to help with depth of penetration. So the type of contact you use, and like we talked about earlier, if you were to take your contact head and bank it over at 45 degrees, that's going to increase reflection, and that's also going to be a negative for your ability to get this light into deeper tissues. If you don't have any awareness of these things when you're treating a patient with laser, you can make a lot of silly mistakes that are going to really impact your treatment. But if you are aware of these concepts, it can really increase the effectiveness of your outcomes. So I want to just go through the physiological effects really quickly. Just understand that there's anti-inflammatory and analgesic effects, and we'll talk about that more in depth here in just a second with the studies. You're going to get increased microcirculation, better production of ATP, RNA, and DNA synthesis, all of which is important for tissue healing. You're going to get increased tissue oxygenation and nutrition, and then an increased rate of tissue regeneration. This gives you a nice idea on sort of the effect on circulation from the laser. So what they looked at here, the red indicates blood flow and perfusion. They took the medial head of a triceps and they hit it with the laser. And they showed at 10 minutes post there was a small amount of increased blood flow, but at 50 minutes there was significantly more. And the reason why this is significant is it's showing you that at 50 minutes, that increased blood flow has nothing to do with any surface heat that was applied 50 minutes ago. That has to deal with that chemical effect and that nitric oxide being released, which is increasing dilation of the smooth muscle and allowing better perfusion into the area. So that's the real magic of the increased circulation behind the laser. So from the inflammation cascade, all these things are going to be affected. As you can see, there's a number of different signals and things that are going to be impacted. So it would take quite a while to tease out all these and go through these with you, but just understand it's not a one-trick pony. It's affecting a lot of different things, and that's why there's still a lot of mechanisms that are being figured out in the literature, because there are so many different things that are impacted. So with regard to tissue healing, you're going to get increased, leukocytic activity. Macrophages are going to get more active. All these things are great for wound care and healing. You're going to get increased collagen production due to the fibroblasts being more active. So you're going to notice the scars are going to be softer. They're going to get better quicker. They're also going to be, stronger. So people that have used laser with their post-surgical patients on their incisions and things of that nature, they usually do really, really well. In addition to the inflammation aspect you're probably primarily trying to address with it. As far as pain, we're going to talk about a specific study here in just a couple minutes, but it's important to understand that there's sort of two classes that pain is affected from the biggest of pictures with the laser. So class 4 lasers that can impart more energy to the nerve, you can get changes immediately in their pain. So if you were to use, I understand the program as a class 2 laser that you guys can practice with the amount of energy that provides, if you did that to a patient's nerve, if they came back two days later, they're probably going to say, hey, you know what, that feels better. That's helping, because there's going to be that long-term effect, which is an anti-inflammatory effect around the nerve. So that's going to decrease bradykinin levels and make a whole bunch of different things happen, which is going to help them feel better. But they're probably not going to have any relief when you pull the wand off of them in the clinic. They're going to go, yeah, that didn't do anything. I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel any heat, and my pain's still the same. So what was that? So you're going to have a lot of selling and explaining to do. But if you're using more energy at the surface and there's a certain amount you have to impart, the thing that's really cool, if you've done this with a patient, and we can maybe do this at the end if anybody has an ache or pain, we can demonstrate that. But you can get changes in their pain scale like right then. And it's because you're affecting the afferent nerve's ability to communicate that pain signal back to the spinal column. So they've shown that depending on the amount of energy, it can affect A alpha, A beta, A delta, as well as the C fibers. Primarily, the easiest ones to affect your ACE, we'll talk about it more in a minute, but the C fibers and the A delta fibers. A delta is the quick pain response, and the C is the more slow responsive, more chronic type pain. But if you can start to go in there and make the transmission speed slow down, all of a sudden people are like, hey, that doesn't hurt as bad. You're just basically slowing down the message. And that's the super, super powerful tool in the clinic, because it gives you a lot more freedom. So if you're trying to manipulate somebody's back and they have a lot of muscle guarding going on around it, you could use a laser for 4 or 5 minutes around those muscles to get that pain signal to come down. All of a sudden the muscle guarding relaxes, and then it makes it much easier for you to get to the joint and affect that tissue that you're looking for. So it can make a lot of things a lot easier. It can make an average therapist look really great, because it makes a lot of things easier, from a physiological standpoint. So specifically, 3 studies I want to take a peek at. There's an epicondylitis study, a rotator cuff performance study, that's sort of an ergogenic aid, and then neuropathic pain, which we'll touch more on. What we were just talking about on the pain idea. So this was a study that was done on epicondylitis with class 4 laser, a 10-watt laser. There was 8 treatments provided over 18 days. The dosage was 10 joules per centimeter squared, and they showed in the double-blind placebo study that there was increased grip strength, decreased pain score, and it was maintained up to 12 months post-treatment. So it wasn't just short-term pain blocking effects. There was actually changes in the tissue, the tendon. As we know, tendinosis is a real difficult thing to treat. It takes time for the body to be able to address that and change that collagen makeup, but this study helps show that can happen. So for grip strength, the green indicates the laser treatment, and the gray is the sham. What they did was, when they did the study, they had 2 laser boxes. One had just the aiming beam on it, and the other one was the normal laser with the 810 and the 980 beams. So patients and the users had no idea which one they were getting. But as you can see, there were significant changes in grip strength versus sham. It took time, 3 months to 6 months, and you would, that's not surprising, as you have to make changes in the tensile properties of that tendon. And when you have a tendinosis that's set up over months and months and months, that doesn't happen overnight. Functional impairment showed really nice change, at 3 months, 6 months, and then 12 months. But notice even after treatment, there was a change, and that effect there was probably due to the pain blocking effects. They were able to use their wrist and arm easier. And same effect there with the pain with grip. Right after they did the treatments, people were able to squeeze harder and not have pain, and that's due to that blocking of those afferent nerves. Whereas at 3-6 months, that's probably more of a change in the tendon itself. Pain with palpation was similar. And just due to neuroplasticity, if you're having pain in an area for months and months and months, that doesn't change overnight either. So you start chipping away at that, you're blocking the pain signal, and all of a sudden you start using that better. They're having cortical changes that are taking place in their whole patterning on how they're using that forearm and wrist. And I think that's probably reflective of why you would see changes in pain with palpation, allodynia, 6 months out. And then just from a test of, the collagen integrity of the tendon, checking the ECRB testing, which is the classic test for lateral epicondylitis, it showed that pain with resistance went way down to just about 0 at 12 months. So it should be pointed in the study that at 12 months, the sham group, they did show improvement with pain and with their grip strength, but it took 12 months and it still wasn't as good as the outcome of the laser group. And as far as the patient's pain, they started noticing changes right away, and then the functional components and the strength components improved significantly over 3 to 6 months. So from an outcome standpoint, the laser really did a nice job there. Any questions about that at all? Very good. So next study I wanted to chat about, this is a general review that was done from the University of Florida. Paul Borsma did it. It was just a review of how laser impacted the post-exercise soreness and DOMS basically, and they also looked at the performance, the muscle performance of muscles when they were treated before exercise with the laser, and they showed that there was extended elapsed time, the total number of repetitions to fatigue, so better endurance, reduced deficit of maximal voluntary contraction, both pre and post exercise, quicker recovery, less lactate, and CK levels in the bloodstream. So that just shows that from the exercise, if you use the laser before, there was less tissue damage and less soreness involved. And the study that followed that by David Levine at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, took a little closer look at that. And that was the study I want to share with you today because it's really pretty cool. What they wanted to see is, hey, if we treat the cuff with the laser and then basically work it out intensively with multiple sets with high reps, what would be the change in performance? So the study design was basically irradiate teres minor and the infraspinatus, and then they took a look at a number of different variables. So subjects were all acclimated to the Biodex, and they did 3 or 4 different sessions to get used to it, to take away training effect on the data. They did a 5-minute warm-up, and then they were strapped into the Biodex, so at 45 and 45. They did external rotation. They did 12 sets of 21 repetitions, about 40 seconds, and they got a 20-second rest in each set. So it looked like that. And what the data showed, I'll get that in just a sec, they hit the infraspinatus and teres minor with the laser and the primary external rotation of the shoulder. They did it at 10 watts total power. There was 20% 810 wavelength and 80% 980. A radius of 1.8 watts per centimeter squared with a total dose of 10 joules per centimeter squared. So typical treatment was at 80 to 120 centimeters square treatment around the scapula for a total amount of energy of 800 to 1200 joules. So they had a placebo group as well as the treatment group, and then at the end they flip-flopped it so that the people that were the placebo got treated too and looked at their data as well. So they took a look at torque, work, peak power, and rate of fatigue. And those curves look very similar. And really, it's very important to understand they treated this right out of the gate and then they did the exercises, so there was no lag. And if you look at those last two data sets, subset 11 and 12, their peak torque was maintained. So it just showed that they were still able to provide force better than the group that did not receive the laser. And that's just due to increased ATP production, better use of glycogen, and the cell's ability to produce force. So that was pretty cool. But what he did was a follow-up study he just presented at a combined section meeting in February of this year in San Antonio. And all he did was he took the laser and he introduced it 30 minutes before the exercise. So giving the cells, if you could think about that slide that showed the vasodilation with the time lapse, he basically allowed the body to have a chance to respond to the laser treatment, and then did the same protocol. And what it showed was very different. So in all sets, there was improved function, and there were significant changes at sets 1, 5, 9, 11, and 14, showing significant improvements in peak power and torque. And so the take home on this is that you need to have a lag. If you were going to use the laser for a patient, say they had a weak quadricep, they were post-surgical, and you're trying to maximize VMO function for that patient, or you had somebody who had a stroke and they were having trouble with getting contraction due to weakness, you'd want to try to apply the laser early in that session to allow the muscle to have a chance to have that ATP production increase, have circulation increase. So you might do the laser, do some manual treatments with them, and then do your functional stuff maybe on the tail end of the session to allow that effect to take place. So how you're choosing to use the laser in your practice is up to you. You know, if you're trying to do it to address pain or address inflammation or address muscle performance, you're going to set the equipment differently with different amounts of energy to accomplish that. But it's a very versatile tool in doing so. And if you think about delayed onset muscle soreness, it happens because of two primary reasons. There's mechanical effects of you're throwing, you're getting mechanical changes at the tendon, the muscle, which creates inflammation. And then you have the chemical part, the inflammatory part of the injury, which is going to create the DOMS as well. So if you use the laser before, what they've shown is it actually cuts down on the mechanical breakdown. And it makes sense if you have more strength there, it's able to control the velocities and things that are going on better than if it was to fatigue out. And if you were to just use the laser afterwards, you would only be addressing the chemical part. So it's going to help in both cases. But what we're seeing is we have units with just about every professional baseball team now, about half the NFL is using our stuff. And some of the real cutting edge trainers are getting away from using ice after workouts. There's been a couple studies recently that have helped point that out. They looked at ice, laser by itself, and ice and laser, and which one had the best effect as far as pain scales after the event. And the laser by itself was better. And the reason why is that instead of just taking those capillaries and restricting them with the cold, which is going to help with interstitial swelling, they're saying, hey, let's just go right to the cells, increase the circulation, let them to metabolize things quicker, get new tissue to repair and lay down, and their athletes are doing better. So in this case, some of these teams, I believe, are starting to use this with their pitchers before they pitch. And at some point, it may be regulated as an ergogenic aid. We're not there yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if down the road it might get monitored. But the ideal window, it's a little debatable, but you're probably looking somewhere in that 30 minutes to 2 hours before the event to get the max benefit of it. From all the stuff I've come across, 2 hours is probably the sweet spot before the event if you want to maximize the muscle performance. So the last study I wanted to just point out was addressing neuropathic pain, and Holanda did this in 2017, and she was looking at the actual mechanisms that take place in the nervous system when you apply the laser to it. Because there's a lot of studies that were like, hey, it helps decrease pain. There's a lot of theory, and she tried to get some clarity there. So this has had an in vitro part and an in vivo part with rats. 15 rats were used, and did a number of different studies with the rats to take a look at their sensitivity to heat and cold and mechanical stimulation. They took the nerve, side nerve, they followed it down. They basically included it at the perineal and the tibial tracts, left the sural alone and basically cut those two nerves, and then sewed the rats back up, left the other side alone, and they compared left versus right. And then there was three groups. The one group had no laser, the second group got laser, and then they basically, at day 7, and then euthanized it then, and there was a long-term group that was basically treated on day 7. They were euthanized on day 22 to show the healing effects. But what they came up with is that basically if you could put 10 watts of energy at the surface, it was enough to create changes at the dorsal root ganglion to create threshold blockings of pain and thermal stimulation. So the conclusion was if you had 270 milliwatts per centimeter squared, which for your patients is probably going to be somewhere in that 10 to 15 joules per centimeter squared, when treating, you're going to get the pain blocking effects. But the concept of why is what's really kind of cool from this study. And in our axon, we have microtubules that, on the dendrite side, a little bit of biology review again. You got your cell body, you got dendrites that are going to receive information, and then the axons that are going to send it out. And on the axonal side, the microtubules, which are part of the structure of the nerve, they're very aligned, they're very polar. And what they're showing is that when you hit it with laser, whether it's a protein aspect or photochemical aspect, the exact why they're still trying to figure out. But what happens is you get these things called varicosities that develop. So if you can imagine just small little wires that start coming off the main wire, and that's what this slide shows. So the top left is the zero time, so no laser, and this is cells hit in a petri dish. Then the next to that on the right is 2 seconds, and then 5 seconds, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and 120 seconds of irradiation. They use 300 milliwatts per centimeter squared with an 880 nanometer laser. So they looked at what happened 40 minutes after it was irradiated. And you can see the density of these varicosities increases significantly. So when they take place, it causes the transmission rate of the nerve, the afferent nerve, to slow down. It also slows down the mitochondrial function in the nerve itself. So the mechanisms that are creating the ATP for the nerve itself and the action potential is slowed down. So there was an effect on the C and the A delta fibers with all groups. And it was hypothesized because their cell bodies are smaller, they're less than 30 microns. When you got to greater than 30 microns, which was the A alpha and the A beta aberrants, it took 120 seconds of irradiation. You can see that lower right corner to have an effect on the bigger sensory nerves, and that's responsible for proprioception and vibration, 2-point discrimination. So from a pain standpoint, the A alpha, A beta aren't the key ones. It's the C and the A delta. So the good news is since they're smaller, it takes less energy to have an effect on those guys, but you slow down their rate and you make a change in people's pain like today. And that's what I thought was really, really cool about this study. And for your patients, if you're looking for an analgesic effect, using a higher power laser with your patients is going to be a real game changer in how they function. So interesting enough, as I look more into the research on these varicosities, the same thing that happens when we use anesthetics. So if you put lidocaine or similar type of medications in the spine, it's going to have this varicosity effect. They're transient, so that it lasts anywhere from 1 to 5 days, and they tend to go away once you remove it. But you can imagine, if you have this pain signal that's coming in to your central nervous system from the periphery, if you can just slow that down or have that, or even remove it for just a period of time, you can have significant effects on the overall system and how it's going to function. So by changing things at the dorsal root without getting too involved in it, you can really cut into chronic pain and make a huge change in the patient. So pretty exciting stuff. And just to break that down, pretty much went over that with the long and the short term. Just to understand, you have to have that window, 270 milliwatts to 1.73 watts per centimeter squared of energy density at the nerve level to make this happen. So again, just not to beat it to death, you have to have a higher level of energy at the surface to get that effect. If you're using a real low powered unit that doesn't have the ability to impart that level of energy, you're not going to see that same aha moment with your patients. So that brings in the idea of dosing, and again, talking about physics at almost 8 in the morning is kind of rough, so we'll keep this very, very short. But just so you guys understand, because if you look at literature, you're going to see these terms, you need to make sure you're fresh with them. So, you know, a watt is a power describer, that's a joule second, or joules per second, excuse me, and then a joule is 1 watt per second. So this total energy is going to be in joules, whereas power is going to be watts. And the reason why that's important is that when you talk about effective laser treating, you need to be thinking about dosage. And dosage is basically joules of energy, total energy over the amount of area you're treating in centimeters squared. So if you think of the size of a compact disc, that's roughly 100 centimeters squared. So when you're looking at a patient, say I was going to treat an arm, and I'm visualizing, okay, I got 1 CD, 2 CDs, 3 CDs worth of tissue I want to try to treat, and you know, hey, I want to be at a certain level of dose, 10 joules per centimeter squared, because I looked up research and they said that was the perfect amount of energy to impart. You would need to have 3,000 joules of energy over the 300 centimeters squared to create that. And that sounds really complicated. The nice thing is our equipment has some software in it that will help you do that calculation. If you know what wattage you want to use and you know the area, you can do this quick summation, and then your desired dosage, it'll figure out the total joules and the time you need. So it makes it a little bit easier for you. The thing that's important to point out is that the power that you're using to treat, it has a significant effect on time. They're inversely related. So if I'm trying to treat at 10 joules per centimeter squared, and I'm treating that area of 300 centimeters, I would need a 50-minute time span with a patient if I had a 1 watt laser. So if you were using your class 2 that you have here and you wanted to impart this much energy, it would be more like 100 minutes to treat that patient. So that becomes a real challenge in an average clinic to do that. But just by increasing it to 3 watts with the same dosage, you would cut that to 16 minutes. And then if you had 10 watts, you could actually get the same amount of energy imparted in just 5 minutes. So clinically, it helps you save a lot of time, and you can treat a very large area when you have a little bit more power at your disposal. And you know, having the right amount of dose is critical, because if you don't have enough energy, you're not going to create a PBM effect on the injured tissue. So to sort of review that, you know, the things that are going to affect dose is going to be the correct wavelength, which the machine that you purchase or use is pretty much going to take care of most of that. The appropriate power on the surface, and then the amount of time you're applying that, which is going to be the things that are going to really affect your dose. So our recommended dosages is just a very cursory, broad stroke recommendation, but for things that are superficial, because you don't have to get as much penetration, if you're using 2 to 6 joules per centimeter squared, that's going to be appropriate for most superficial problems. And then if you're trying to treat something deeper, like in the low back, piriformis, sciatic nerve, you're going to need more energy, more in the 6 to 15 joules per centimeter squared, possibly even more. Chronic energy or chronic injuries are going to require more energy as well, as opposed to acute. They're going to be treated on the more conservative side, just due to the nature of the tissue involved. So just to review the factors that are going to affect penetration, you know, you have the competing soft tissues to be aware of, the wavelength that you're going to use, the power of the surface, the skin color of your patient, and the body type. You know, if they're a big individual, you're going to need more power just to get down in depth. Things you can affect as a clinician is going to be the equipment you choose to use, you know, the wavelength settings you're going to use, the power and the time that you treat, as well as the treatment type head that you choose. Some units don't have any ability to change what you use. We have 5 different heads that you can use to play around and basically customize your treatment to the best of your ability. And then as far as your technique when you're applying the laser, how fast you move it, how far you hold it off from the skin, if you have it angled and such, all those things can affect your effectiveness in getting down into deeper tissues. So in conclusion, you know, the laser will stimulate the body to repair injured tissues when adequate light energy is applied at depth. Laser can impact recovery when used both before and after exercise, and laser has immediate and long-term effects on neuropathic pain. And many factors can impact your therapeutic dosing. So a well-directed laser therapy protocol can be a significant benefit in reducing pain, maximizing performance, and decreasing the time needed to return to sport due to the effects on tissue healing and inflammation. So I know that's a lot of information, and I know it's still early in the morning, so hopefully that was helpful. Is there any questions that anybody has as far as any of the stuff we talked about today? Or does anybody have a story with the use of a laser with a patient that they saw a good outcome or something similar to what we were talking about today? I got it. So I brought one of our lasers here. If anybody has time and has an ache or a pain, wants to try it out or hasn't experienced this, I'm more than happy to show you how it works and treat anybody. But otherwise, I know you guys have class at 8, so I'll let you guys go. But thank you very much for your attention.